Hi everyone, I'm Ashlyn Bridges. I'm your program manager of Mission Expansion in Best Buddies, Texas. Woot woot, I'm in Houston. Welcome to the orientation. Today is just a brief overview on where to start in your Best Buddies path, how to get things going in your chapter. So we'll be highlighting some important information that's in the video playlist, but you'll be able to find more details in the resources I'll be outlining for you today, as well as more information in detail about Best Buddies and best practices in our local leadership training day held in September. So today we're going to cover those Best Buddy basics, learning about the who, what, when, where, and why we do what we do. Then I'm going to give you a tool to do what we do, which is called roster. And then I'm going to talk about resources that we have available to help you accomplish the Best Buddies mission. So diving straight on in, who we are Best Buddies International. We are a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to ending the isolation of people with IDD. So the physical, the social, the economical, financial isolation of people with IDD. And we do that by creating opportunities for one-to-one friendships, integrated employment, leadership development, inclusive living. Those are our main pillars. So we want to create those different opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so we have 9 signature programs. And in the one-to-one friendship pillar, people with an IDD are matched into a friendship with someone without an IDD. So that is our school program, so middle school, high school, college, maybe elementary, our citizens programs, our e-buddies programs. Our integrated employment, or our jobs program, helps people with IDD find gainful employment. We start with helping them build their resume, their interview skills, training the employers of our participants and best practices, and really making sure that it's a great fit, and then we coach them on their job for life. Leadership development, or our ambassador program or promoter programs, really focus on advocacy and teaching people how to speak up for themselves and really gain more independence. So really focusing on those public speaking skills, those interpersonal communication skills. And our inclusive living, though we don't have it here in Texas, our goal is to provide trainings throughout the year that helps people move towards an independent and inclusive living situation. So that's our programs in a nutshell. We are a global organization, international organization. We're in 56 countries and 6 continents across the world, and we have 27 state offices. In Texas alone, we have about 115 chapters or so. And so we are in maybe 30 counties or so in Texas. But we know Texas is huge and the world is huge. And so there's about almost a little over 250 counties in Texas, and there's 190 so recognized countries in the world. So we got some work to do. We still have a lot of work to do. We all have a responsibility to push the needle forward for inclusion. And so with that responsibility can look differently depending on who you are. Individually, the responsibility of spreading inclusion for a chapter president, a buddy director, a secretary, a staff member looks a lot differently, right? We all have our individual roles. Collectively, as an organization, as an officer corps, as a community, we have a responsibility to spreading the mission by maintaining chapter connections, by maintaining active BBO reporting, and then submitting our chapter dues. That is what is necessary to maintain active status as a Best Buddies chapter currently in the COVID climate. That chapter connection, however you want it to look like, that's up to you. Whether it's through social media, through Zoom calls, through social distancing at a park, those chapter connections are very fluid and flexible this year. Best Buddies are Best Buddies online reporting. That is how we maintain our chapters. That's our database for understanding where our chapters are and what they're doing. So maintaining an active calendar and making sure that every member in the organization has a membership application is super important, and is a responsibility of the officer corps to make sure that happens. And then lastly, the responsibility of a chapter, maintaining active chapter dues. $350 for the entire school years cover everyone in the chapter. And so we know that with COVID currently running crazy across the state, we are very flexible in our receiving of the chapter dues and the BBO reporting and making sure those chapter connections happen. So we're very flexible and we're very fluid in understanding that though we have that checklist of things we're trying to accomplish, we understand that COVID is happening out here. So moving forward, like I was saying, the checklist of things, that there's a list of things you want to start thinking about, right, when you're leading a chapter. So whether this is your first semester in Best Buddies or your chapter's been around forever, the steps leaders take to create an awesome organization are pretty much the same across the board. We call it that life cycle of Best Buddies. So when you're creating a chapter strategy or how to make sure that you're spreading the mission of inclusion, there's 4 things I want you guys to keep in mind. First things first, that chapter calendar or your checklist of things. So like I mentioned, you want to have those chapter connections, and how you do that is completely up to your school. But you want to keep in mind the communication channels that you have, the logistics, the different school policies that are even out there, what your county is saying in regards to face-to-face interactions. So you want to make sure that you have an idea of your calendar and what you plan to accomplish this year. Number 2, flexibility. Though we have our plan, you don't need to have everything figured out before you get started. Just having a basic plan of, these are our leaders and we want to accomplish 1, 2, 3 will get you very far. And so you want to make sure that though you have your calendar, your checklist and ideas, you want to be flexible in that, especially now. Number 3, communication. I always say multiple groups and multiple channels. There's a lot of different ways we communicate now. We can communicate via email, Zoom, phone calls, text messages, group me's, smoke signals, newsletters. There's so many ways. Social media, I don't know if I said that, but there's so many ways we communicate now. So you want to make sure you're choosing the right avenue or the right channel for the right crowd you're trying to communicate with. So if you're trying to communicate with your buddy parents, it might be a different method you use to communicate with your peer buddies or your associate members. So you want to make sure you're communicating with, if you would list them out, it would be your chapter officers, your members, your parents, the chapter's school administration and faculty, any community partnerships that you have made, and then most importantly, of course, the program managers, your staff contacts. So maintaining active communication, open communication there is super important. And number 4, your SMART goals. You want to make it clear for yourself to tell whether or not your chapter has accomplished your goals, right? We want to just we want to be intentional. There's a little sneak peek for you in our activities in our calendar. So maintaining goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, super important. But enough about the things you want to think about when you're creating your strategy. How do you do it, right? Where's the starting point of creating your chapter strategy? That is where we have roster. Roster is our philosophy for the volunteer experience, because we have these ideas and we have these plans and these goals and these questions and this timeline in our head of what we want to have happen. But how do you do it? Where do you start? Roster kind of orders your steps that way, so you can make it easier on yourself. So starting with roster, we have recruit. That's who will be involved or where will you find them. You're onboarding your members. you're supporting your members, you're thanking your members, and then you're engaging your members, and you review and you repeat. So roster is, like I mentioned, that tool we use to help spread inclusion, not only just in schools, but we use that in the community. We use that with our own volunteers outside of schools. So moving right along, starting with recruiting. What is recruiting? Recruiting, I would define recruiting as finding quality volunteers. Keyword is quality. What's a quality volunteer? It's a volunteer that understands their role, cares about the mission, agrees to commit to the role or to commit to the what's being asked of them, and then they're coachable. They're able to be, the best volunteer and want to be the best volunteer. So they'll take, different ideas and be flexible in their approach with Best Buddies. And you can find those quality volunteers at any time. Though there's like a timeline that you think in your head, like, oh, well, I want to have the match by this time. And I want to have this event, so I've got to make sure I have this many people. That's great and all, but people are always able to join the mission. People are always able to come and be a part of Best Buddies. So you want to keep that in mind. And you can find those quality volunteers anywhere. You can find them at like freshman orientation, the meet the teacher events, during lunchroom or a passing period if your school is still having those, club fairs, parent teacher associations. Those are great places to look for volunteers. And the question of how do you get them to commit, or how do you recruit them to the Best Buddies mission? To answer the question of how do we get people into our Best Buddies organizations is answered by, well, why do people join the mission? So you always want to start with why. People join Best Buddies not because of what we do, but why we do it. Simon Sinek has an awesome video on that I know Allie's going to dive right into on Saturday, September 12th. So I won't get too much into that, but you want to start with why, because that's what's going to compel people to be a part of the mission. And so looking for school volunteers, you're not just looking for students, you're looking for school administrators. So anyone in the registrar's office, the secretaries, any other faculty members, any teaching aides or assistants that are still in the classrooms. You want to reach out to everyone. Even the lunch ladies can find a role in Best Buddies. And then, of course, you want to find some parent volunteers too. Parents are the #1 valuable resource in an organization, in a Best Buddies chapter. So you want to make sure you're finding some parent volunteers that are interested in helping out some. Jumping right on into onboarding. Onboarding is just a fancy word for training. So how are you training your volunteers? You have these quality members, you have these quality volunteers. So what do you do with them? You get them registered, you get them on Best Buddies online with their membership application. So when they register online, they're able to see the semester calendar and any of the pictures or announcements on the like main homepage. So you want to make sure you get them registered online. It is so important that every member that's registered online in Best Buddies Online has a membership application, because that is how Best Buddies International knows who's covered under liability insurance. So it's super important that make sure everyone has a membership application. Once you have everyone's membership application in, you want to give them a good training. And what are you training them on? Well, of course, the Best Buddy basics, everything I covered before, your mission, your pillars, your programs, our impact, the key messages. You want to encourage your leaders to review any of the training materials that are already on Best Buddies University so that they can be on the same understanding as you. Some other information you might want to train your members on, things like people first language, and how to set boundaries, how to ask and not assume that our buddies may need help. Another thing you might want to talk to your members on, train your members on, is the difference between paternalism and infantilization, because we're creating advocates. So we're all equal. We're all peers in our organizations. So those are the things you want, or even, top of my head, that we are a friendship program and not a mentorship program. There's a difference there. So those are some things you might want to include in your peer buddy or your chapter training. Another thing you want to onboard your members with is your chapter structure. So everything you plan on doing for your chapter, right? If there's committees, any volunteer opportunities, any calendar of events that you guys may have, any additional expectations, how you communicate your chapter leaders, who's in charge is important to share. Any culture, things of that nature is important to train your volunteers on. And if you guys are having one-to-one friendships, you want to make sure that you're screening your peer buddies, and you're just really just getting to know them to make sure that they're a quality volunteer, making sure that they understand what it means to be a peer buddy. Do they care about the mission? Can they commit? Are they willing to be coachable? And that can be done whatever works best for your chapter. I've seen some chapters do interviews, applications, they've done references, or they have a little peer buddy agreement that they sign off on. Completely up to you and what works best for your chapter, and what you're onboarding them with. So after you got your volunteers, after you've trained them, you want to make sure you are supporting their friendships. You're creating an environment that fosters inclusive friendships. It's the responsibility of chapter leadership to create the activities, the communication, and the events to help foster those friendships. So when it comes to chapter activities, don't recreate the wheel. Figure out what's already happening around campus or what's already happening online. For example, if you are trying to host a virtual event and you are trying to figure out, like, how do I do a tour of a museum? There's a million online tours of museums. You don't have to go and try to, recreate the wheel in that. Or if you heard of someone hosting a party, a watch party on Facebook, inviting everyone to the chat, and that's in the chapter, will help put together some of those things that are already out there. And so it kind of takes the stress off of you as a chapter leader. When it comes to getting the support of your administration, your faculty, or your parents, you want to be specific. You want to give them specific ways that you want to get them involved, right? So you just want to keep them in the loop and start early. And because we all know as adults, we don't want to be asked to do something at the last minute. So maintaining that active communication early and keeping them in the loop will help get the support of your administration and your parents. And then those, like I mentioned, those events, though we are living in a COVID society, we have no idea what our events are going to look like, whether they're going to be all virtual or in person. So just maintaining your flexibility and your supporting of their events are important there too. We're going to jump in a little bit later on how Best Buddies Texas supports you as a chapter leader when I go over the resources later on. But moving right on into thanking, our T in roster, thanking, you want to make sure you're creating an attitude of gratitude. It's important to have volunteer appreciation because it makes your volunteers feel important to the mission, right? It feels that they're tied to something bigger than themselves. And that's how you retain members. And those members encourage other volunteers. I always talk about how the best advertisement is word of mouth. And so if you have a great volunteer who feels appreciated, they're going to be the ones talking about the mission on your behalf more than you are, right? Because they're going to talk about how awesome this organization feels and how awesome it makes them feel. So ways to thank our volunteers could be in thank you cards, classic thank you cards, any small gifts, giving them awards, appreciation events, giving them a promotion of duties, like if they were once an associate member and they rocked it out the park and they did amazing, making them an officer or giving them an officer or committee head position is definitely a way of showing your appreciation. You just have to figure out what works best for that volunteer. Everyone's motivated differently. And so one way some people are motivated is through rewards, right? Through small gifts. So like getting them a Chick-fil-A gift card would just make someone's day, right? Whereas some people are motivated by recognition. So being named the buddy pair of the month or getting a leadership position, really motivates them to stay a part of the mission. I do know some chapters use consequence like point system or demerit systems. I don't recommend it, but I do know some chapters have found some success with that. But I always tend to encourage the positive reinforcement in order to motivate volunteers. So there's that. Moving into thinking, moving after thinking is engaging. The E in roster stands for engagement. So everyone defines engagement differently. I define engagement as continuous involvement with our mission. So regular Joe Schmo in the school asks, like, how can I get involved? It's usually one of two answers, right? It's usually, well, we're fundraising for this and we love you to help. We would love for you to help. Or, well, this is our organization and our mission is this, and it's so great, and this is what we have going on, and this is why it's important. We really want you to get involved in our whatever the thing is that's spreading awareness. And so that's kind of what I think of when I think of engaging, and that can be done in school or out of school, in the community, online. It can be done anywhere, right? Fundraising, the classic spirit nights or give backs, selling merchandise like t-shirts or having a bake sale, car washes, or even what I suggest most importantly right now are sponsors, finding local businesses that are willing to sponsor specific in-kind or sponsor specific donations like chapter dues. Content is an awesome way to get the community engaged there. When it comes to spreading awareness, things like newsletters, social media, doing announcements on your school's on your school's website about the organization and how it's important to spread inclusion, is a great way to engage a different crowd of people there too. So moving right along, the roster, the last R stands for review and repeat. So you want to review your chapter's performance, review your roster plan, and celebrate the wins you had, right? Especially after this year, I can only imagine the different logistical challenges that we're going to have to work through, trying to overcome COVID-19 in the school systems. And so when we find something that works, we want you guys to celebrate that and be proud of yourselves for that. And then if things don't work out as well as we hoped, then we need to reevaluate and set new goals, and figure out a new roster plan that works for you. And so that is roster. That is your tool to managing the volunteer experience. Before I move, the next part, I want to make sure I covered everything. I think I did. Cool. So, resources. So, as I mentioned earlier, Best Buddies is Best Buddies Texas and Best Buddies International. Our responsibility is to support U.S. chapter leaders in spreading the mission of inclusion. And we do that virtually for now. So we have all of our online resources. So any videos, any templates, trainings, or facilitation notes, all of that can be found online. And then we have local resources that our local staff is putting together. So I do want to make the distinction that some of our resources is managed by International, Best Buddies International, the HQ, and then some of our local resources is handled by our state staff, our Texas staff. And so I just want to make that distinction. So there's some things that we can help you find and navigate, like our group needs or our buddy beats that we send out, any local leadership training day information, things of that nature, any events that we host locally, virtually, online. We can help navigate that with you. There's some things we can't really change because that's dealing with headquarters territory at that point. But knocking through this and what each one of these are, Best Buddies University is our online one-stop shop for all things Best Buddy. So that's where you're going to find a lot of our videos, a lot of our templates, a lot of our training and facilitation notes. Will be held on Best Buddies University. I know they are revamping it currently right now with the virtual toolkit to be useful for the fall, because I know we had a virtual toolkit for the spring. So we'll give you an update on when that will be available. But that is a BBI resource. Another BBI resource is the Best Buddies Online and your chapter portal. So that is, like I mentioned, where all of our membership applications go through, all of our reporting is done. That's how it's our internal database to understanding of what's important, what's happening on the ground level. Another amazing resource is Sanford Harmony. Sanford Harmony is our national partner that creates all of our curriculum for our elementary school and middle school programs. Even at the high school level, they have an app that you can use that has digitalized all of their resources that usually comes in that cute little kit. So I suggest you download that app. We'll put the link of all of these resources in our Buddy Bee coming up. But that is another resource that I would implore each and every one of you to download to help facilitate some of those chapter activities that happen. Your Best Buddies family. So that is things like our group meet, our local leadership training days that we put together that gives you guys different opportunities to network and meet each other and talk to each other. Because we can tell you as program managers what's going on, right? But it's always great to hear from another advisor how they're doing things in their school. It's always amazing to hear from a buddy director and hearing the impact directly of how Best Buddies has changed their life. So being plugged into the Best Buddies family and our network is another resource you don't want to take for granted, especially here in Texas. Our Best Buddies family is super strong. We have a couple of Best Buddies family members who are on the YLC, the Young Leadership Council. That's a very prestigious, in my opinion, group of students that help nationals create information. So we have 2. There's only 12 in the nation, and we have 2 in Texas. So you want to make sure you're plugging into your family there. Leadership Conference is a resource that's put together from BBI. It recently just passed in July, sad face. But all of the videos that were on there, it will be transferred to BBU later throughout this month. So if you haven't had a chance to dive into the video playlist, a lot of the videos from the video playlist come from the Best Buddies Leadership Conference. And then lastly, but not leastly, your program managers are a Best Buddies resource. We are here to help you. We are here to get you plugged in and get you connected to the right people and get you to be a successful, sustainable chapter. And so it is our job to make chapter management easy. So we want to make sure that you maintain that communication with your chapter, with your program manager. And that's all I have for today. Just some final thoughts. Like I mentioned, as program managers, we just want to see you succeed. We want to make chapter management easy. And so we can't help what we don't know. So Best Buddies Online doesn't tell the whole chapter story, right? It doesn't tell the progress of a chapter, how great you guys have come from. So maintaining that chapter check-in with your program manager is super important. And that all chapters, whether you're in Dallas, Houston, Beaumont, Lubbock, El Paso even, all of our chapters are managed under the same guidelines, have the same life cycle, and are in the same uncertain boat or boat of uncertainty. So please feel free to reach out to each other because we are a team, we're a family, and we want to make sure that you're successful. Allie, Joaquin, and I talk regularly, if not hourly, on each one of your chapters. So it doesn't really matter which program manager you reach out to, but just make sure you're maintaining connections with someone. Please be sure to join us next month for LLTD. September 12th is being held by Allie Lewis, and she'll be covering all things chapter management. September 19th is going to be held by Joaquin Escalante, and he will be covering education and advocacy and the disabilities rights movement. I will be hosting a session on September 26th, I think is the next one, right? Yes, September 26th. And that one will be on leadership development. And leadership in general is such a broad term. There's so many sessions on leadership. This particular session will be held with our state leadership. So our state director, area director, director of programs will be joining us on that call, so you don't want to miss that. We encourage you guys to to join all 3 of those sessions. And if you can't, no worries, it'll be recorded, but I encourage you to find another chapter leader to join us that time. But that's all I had. I truly appreciate you guys tuning in for today. Please let me know if there's anything I can help you with. Put any questions in the chat or email us afterwards if you can't, if you think of them later on. And that's all I had. Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys. Bye.